All right. How's everybody doing? Woo! Can we get a round of applause? Can we get some jumping jacks? Let's get some energy in the room. There we go. Well, excited to do this panel. We're, I think, going to talk about kind of the basics of kind of compute, mostly around compute, bandwidth, and then also on the energy side and kind of the intersection of crypto and how it potentially relates to AI. So I think this will be an interesting panel. I'll let everybody introduce themselves briefly. My name is Logan, managing partner at Frictionless Capital. We can kind of just go down the line real quick, and then we'll get into some questions.
All right, thank you, Logan. My name is Honor Masters. I'm an investor at Crucible Capital. Started my career on Wall Street, actually was involved in a number of the early blockchain projects, such as R3 Consortium, back when banks really wanted to get into blockchain, didn't quite get into it at the time. Knew that I wasn't going to learn a whole lot about the crypto space there, so I joined a crypto hedge fund in 2018, mostly focused on the business development side. Was there for about 2 years. Decided to get my MBA at Columbia and really double down on the energy space. I'd actually worked on a number of transactions during my banking years where I was looking at divesting out of physical oil commodities businesses. And so I was always fascinated by the intersection of sort of crypto and energy within that value chain. And so joined a fund called Energize Capital after that. They manage about $2 billion today, investing exclusively in energy software. And as I was thinking about moving back to New York and what I wanted to do next, this energy, compute, crypto thesis was something that Meltem and I had been mulling over for about 6 months or so. And we started to work together, and I'm bringing sort of the grid optimization, battery optimization software, intel to sort of this new performant compute infrastructure. And so that intersection has really only started to get more and more exciting as this year has progressed. So I'll pass it on to Tynan, one of our portfolio companies.
Hi guys, I'm Tynan. I am the CEO of Verse. We make compute both mobile, and we allow you to basically like time version it. So, you know, I spent most of my career working as like an AI researcher, mostly like around GPUs. But this concept of sort of like environments for like sort of models to live in, to sort of execute in, was like something that was very interesting, especially as we move towards like a world of agents. And it got me thinking about, I would say, this concept of like versioning, right? About being able to provide sort of like time-bounded guarantees on like when compute will execute and when it will not, and then being able to then migrate it around, not from, you know, just between computers within a data center, but between data centers, between clouds, between any sort of like compute infra that you could plug into them. Yeah.
Hi, I'm David Rhodus, founder and CEO of Permissionless Labs, contributor to Pipe Network. We're building like a ultra low latency content delivery network to compete against brands like Akamai and Cloudflare. Previously spent a lot of time in the video streaming industry. Had to exit to AWS in 2015 for a video transcoding company, essentially building this CDN product to take back to the video streaming industry and, you know, revolutionize that.
Awesome. Well, we'll try to keep this entertaining and get some of the panelists to talk some shit to keep everybody entertained. But maybe starting with Honor, I think the industry, particularly on the AI side, we've seen a lot of people kind of a race to build out the largest data centers. And what we've seen is energy has been the bottleneck. What are your thoughts on kind of the US or even globally on like the lack of energy production on the compute side?
Yeah, so we have to build about 150 gigawatts of capacity to our existing US grid. That is the largest amount of energy growth since World War II. This is about $1 trillion worth of power gap that we need to literally put stuff in the ground. Whilst we're solving that problem, we also have to think about the fact that our grid is already very unstable. As we're sitting here right now, we're experiencing a heat wave that's actually causing 500,000 customers within the PJM territory to be completely blackout, no power, no AC in 100-degree weather. We're actually experiencing over 10 times more blackouts in America, period, since the 1980s. And so we're thinking about adding all this AI infrastructure, and no one's thinking about the fact that we need these power optimization tools, we need orchestration layers to be able to build a compute infrastructure that makes sense. And a lot of that I think we'll talk about during this panel, but efficiency is going to be critical, and I think actually Tynan is building something that's really in line with that as well. So
maybe we can tie the compute and the bandwidth side together, because I think the bandwidth between compute has been historically the bottleneck, and even the egress costs on things like AWS. You start running the numbers and they're pretty expensive. David, I don't know if you have any thoughts about egress costs, kind of how the intersection of AI, sorry, not AI, but specifically crypto and like bandwidth can kind of play a part together.
Yeah, I think so. We have, we just turned on revenue last week, so we're very new to this kind of crypto industry. Our team's mostly Web 2. We hit 150,000 revenue last week, and most of that streaming video today, we do have a tremendous amount of startups playing with our product for like chatbots and all kinds of cool things where it's like, we can take the latency down to like, 3-6 milliseconds. If you're like using Akamai or Cloudflare, it's like 80, 100 milliseconds today. So we're very bullish on like this AI compute and like bringing like inference and pieces to the edge, and hopefully like connecting back to the GPU clusters. There's like tremendous amount of tooling that I think needs to be innovated, and we're just focused on like delivering bandwidth at like 3 milliseconds basically.
And on the compute side, I think the interesting thing probably about this panel is there's a lot of crypto skeptics. From the energy side to CDN to compute, crypto, in my mind, is almost a byproduct to help create a better product through coordination, through different distribution methods, but it's not the actual product itself. And so I would love to hear on the compute side kind of how you're thinking about things, even miniaturizing the tech, even maybe expanding on the egress chat that we had earlier.
Yeah, so if you think about like, what three things do you need to build a cloud, right? You need bandwidth, you need storage, and you need compute. And bandwidth is like actually this very critical part of this because of this entire idea of sort of like of data gravity, where when data goes into AWS, it's free. But every gigabyte that you try and get out, they will absolutely like rip your eyes out. And it's that basically stops sort of like compute fluidity from actually like being able to be possible, right? Of being able to take up like a running machine and move it not from a US East 1A to US East 1F, but to GCP, to a sort of like mom and pop type data center that is like just springing up, right? But also like it limits our applications and what we can build, right? Like we were talking earlier, right, about like the amount of like bandwidth that like sort of like high throughput like crypto centers.
Most blockchains today do, the earlier ones would do kilobytes of throughput per second, which was extremely limited.
Yeah.
Solana was kind of the first to get to megabytes. But if you look at like high frequency trading, they do like many gigabytes of throughput per second. Like they have 50, 80, 100 megabytes or gigabyte switches. So I think for the industry, crypto industry, we have to kind of go from dial-up broadband to like fiber and beyond. But it is a big bottleneck, which I think why it's very interesting to have all these panelists, because they're each kind of attacking it from a different angle, but maybe kind of directionally moving in the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we can't, like, if AWS and GCP and Azure control like 80 or 90% of the global compute market, right? Then like you end up everyone ends up paying them like a tax constantly, right? And we are sort of all just like living on the land, right, of these data centers. And our ability to actually like to do things, to make products, right, to put forth ideas into the world and actually make them come into reality is limited. It's gatekept by those figures.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm curious how you guys are tackling that. I mean, David's focus on like the actual bandwidth side, your focus on the compute, also focus on the energy. How like do you think these potential pieces come together? Do they not?
I think. Oh, sorry.
I was going to queue up you for the energy. So like, it's very fascinating. Like looking at CDNs today, they globally use a little over 1% of the entire world's energy. Video streaming uses 3% of the global energy. So like optimizing these like in a decentralized manner, we've had some analysts tell us that we can probably shave 30% off of what the global CDN uses for electricity. So I imagine there's a lot of like very unique areas that can be innovated with crypto.
Yeah, it's really fascinating you bring that up. I think that back when Bitcoin miners were getting to scale, they were using about 1 to 2% of the U.S. capacity. Now data centers, with the rise of all of this new infrastructure, they're going to be around 10 to 11%. And that's crazy to think about because we're already seeing rising energy bills from the consumer perspective, rising it faster than the rate of inflation. So I think pretty soon we're gonna have a lot of issues there. And it will take a lot of solutions like yours to
Yeah, totally. Facebook is launching 2 or 3 data centers with like 2 gigawatts into each of those today. It's phenomenal. Like we've never seen data centers that big. It's
So maybe kind of relating this back to the crypto aspect, with kind of the Web 2 infrastructure, we saw data centers get built around the world. You had Amazon Web Services East, you had Amazon Web Services West, Europe, etc. And they built out these large data centers to cut down on the latency to the end users. And I think part of kind of blockchain holistically kind of being this coordination network, it allows you to coordinate large kind of infrastructure, but also much smaller. So you can even move to devices in the home. And when you can coordinate smaller devices in the home at scale, it really unlocks some unique kind of aspects from the crypto side, which I think all these panelists probably have unique points of view on.
Yeah, I would plug Sourceful here really quick. So they're really building a crypto-enabled DER aggregation layer. DERs are distributed energy resources. And so they're bringing down the payback period for installing home solar, home batteries, metering, and various other home assets. But I think for them, they're focused on building a really great product first before launching any token. I think for them, it's really about launching some of their battery partnerships as well and bringing down that customer acquisition cost. So I think it's a really interesting business model when you think about, especially as energy costs are rising, how can you really, improve the payment flow for reducing some of your home energy costs using some of these platforms.
Yeah, I think the blockchain coordination is phenomenal. Like we tried honestly every way possible to build this without touching blockchain. Our team is like super negative on blockchain, honestly, and it was impossible. Like to send out as many like ACH wire transfers. Like today we have 260,000 nodes in our network, and it'd be impossible to like get a bank to do that without us like forking up a couple $100,000 a week. So blockchain coordination's amazing. Like we have all these nodes, and then if we have gaps in the network, so like for example, today we have no nodes in Wyoming, and we're getting ready to put some on-chain bounties out next week to fill in like Jackson Hole and Cheyenne. And in history, there's never been a on-chain bounty that's went unfulfilled. So it's like a superpower that we can deploy nodes anywhere by just paying like a small premium on that. And that doesn't exist outside of blockchain. And people are coming in, it's like they want to run like huge nodes in like LA, New York. It's phenomenal. Like for example, we had an analyst show us some math. Like if someone comes in with like 400 gigabits of internet bandwidth, which is available today, and some good servers, if that's a really reputable node and it's getting like consistent traffic, that's $1 million a month and rewards they can earn. So we're super excited about blockchain now. Like we've become blockchain bulls at this point.
David, I think I saw you on a podcast recently where you're pitching to Web 2 customers about places like emerging markets like India where they actually don't have any bandwidth available. And so you're saying like, hey, we could really open up this market for you. Watching cricket, for the example you used.
Yeah,
fascinating.
It's wild because like if you look at a company like Netflix or Amazon Video, Hulu, their most important thing is brand image. And they'd love to service like Egypt and, smaller places, but they don't have sufficient bandwidth. So like now we're in talks like, hey, let's put bounties here. How many people can we get? It's really amazing that we can like give them more like users, more revenue. And then, we're working hand in hand in great partnerships with these like, Fortune 100 companies.
It's almost like Uber surge pricing for infrastructure, which is the cool part.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, we're kind of like taking a key off of Solana, but like we also built in, for example, priority bandwidth fees. So like, I'll use like a scenario in my past. So like I was at Amazon Video and we launched live streaming in Europe. And as you can imagine, Christmas Day, like the charts are going crazy. And we're actually starting to use all the bandwidth we had provisioned from Akamai and Limelight and others. And we're calling them up. We're like, we'll pay you whatever. We don't care. Like, we have infinite money is what our manager told us. And the company's like, no, we've already sold it. So we're in like this horrible situation. And we've got to start downgrading the quality of video we deliver. So it's like hurting our brand. And what we built is like, we built a bandwidth fee market. So we can come in and people can outbid each other's. So a priority fee, and, there's scenarios where that's like super valuable. Like, the rest of that bandwidth idle, even though it had been procured, it's also very helpful in like some really niche like AI pieces. I think high frequency trading also, those guys, they want to pay whatever they can get the data quickest back to those supercomputers and decide how to do that trade execution.
Yeah, I love the idea of tapping into underutilized resources and underutilized demand. And our mutual portfolio company, 00, I mean, we're thinking about ways to use both terrestrial and undersea fiber cables, dark fiber that's not currently being used for anything else or not used very frequently. So it's a super fascinating concept.
It is. I think the interesting part that we're starting to see in crypto networks is the infrastructure getting to the point where you can start to make usable applications. When Ethereum existed, I don't know how many people are bullish on Ethereum, but I'm personally not. When you're doing 12 transactions per second, it's hard to build anything useful. And so once you actually kind of scale up, you have more bandwidth, more transactions, then you can start creating more interesting markets and having more interesting price discovery. And so, like, for example, on Solana, we've started to see them do billions of daily trading volume, hyperliquid as well, where you can build more engaging trading systems globally. But then the byproduct of that is you can also start to build up more interesting decentralized applications. And so I think the interesting part of this panel too is these DePin networks more broadly are starting to get to the point where they're making revenue. And the revenue word in blockchain is unspoken of. We don't speak of revenue. But some projects are actually starting to make money, which I think is really exciting for the industry because it's kind of shows this maturing point that we're actually building things useful enough that people will pay for them. If anybody has to add on there. Starting to get to the spice because we got a good amount of time left.
This really confuses me. So Akash is generating, some revenue at the moment, right? They're a distributed GPU platform. The token has gone nowhere. I don't really understand the disconnect there. I'm not well versed in tokenomics, so I'd love to actually ask you what are some of the projects that you're excited about where you're seeing that mesh together properly?
I'll pass it to David and this side of the panel as well. I mean, I think in the hedge fund or venture industry, people are also excited about Hyperliquid because they're actually making money on fees, and then they do a buyback and burn. I think historically in the United States, more specifically, we're trying to skirt around, are these things security, are they not? And so it's kind of iffy. I think some of that may change in the future. Some people may push the boundaries in the future. But the buyback and burn seems to be kind of standard, but I think this side of the house has maybe thought about it a little bit more.
Yeah, so we're no Web3 natives, so we're born to think about revenue, and the token is just out there for, rewards basically in our mind. And, we're talking to Blockworks, and we're sharing our revenue with them. They're like, God, so day one, you guys are like number 10 in DePin revenue, and then we end the week and we're in like number 4. They show us like who's number 1, and we're looking at it and we're like, who can verify this? Like, so it's very questionable. And I think like from a product standpoint, like, if you look at what we're delivering and the feedback we get from like people testing it at these these super multi-billion-dollar companies, they're like, okay, you're 5x, you're 10x faster in LA than all the existing Web 2 content delivery networks. So like, we've got a product that outcompetes an entire Web 2 industry, and that's only possible because of the blockchain orchestration. And I think that's where revenue is going to tie in. It's not just like revenue, we're powering some like, TikTok games or whatever. It's like revenue when an entire industry is being outcompete by blockchain and enabled technology.
Yeah, I mean, so if you look at like what cloud computing's projected total spend or total revenue spent on cloud computing by 2030, it's going to be $1.74 trillion, right? That's a huge, absolutely huge market, right? But all of that is currently like basically aggregated in like a handful of like very large players, right? So it's like the sort of stuff that you're building that is going to sort of like allow us to like break it open, right? To sort of like defeat this law of like data gravity, right? To actually get like true sort of like interconnect bandwidth speeds that allow us to function like one large sort of like global or countrywide sort of cloud.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like all the compute's so centralized, and it's like hundreds of miles away from the user, so just adding tremendous latency. So like, crazy innovators like yourself that are going to push it to the edge, like, God bless you,
I personally think about it, to go back to your question, Honor, about like starting from the product point of view, and at least from my mind, what I've seen in like the crypto universe is blockchains are good for coordination, they're good for trading, and that coordination piece I think lends pretty well to like the DePin type networks. And so like, I think you're dead if you can't build a better product. So if you don't build a better product, no one's going to pay for it anyway. So in my mind, things are still a little iffy-ish, but if you start with actually building a better product and then work your way back, which again, trading seems to have product market fit. People like memes. People like
Trading meaning speculation.
Exactly. People like the volatility, and so that has product market fit. And then the other thing is via the coordination network of the L1, like what these gentlemen are doing, can you actually build a net better product? And that's where I think you can kind of get into the monetization piece. I think it's kind of short-sighted just to say like, how do you monetize these things without asking the question of, does this actually build a better product? And if it does, I think they can figure out like the token side.
Yep, that's very fair. I think for us, what we've focused on, you mentioned coordination, you mentioned trading, but there's also payments. And so we've looked at and invested in a number of businesses that are using stablecoins for transactions that are demonstrably better in many different ways. One of which is actually an equipment supplier that's working with one of the largest OEMs in the country. They provide things like UPS, switchgear, transformers for data centers, and what they're really struggling with is on the OEM level, they're a massive corporation. They work with hundreds of thousands of different types of equipment suppliers that are really just mom and pop in size. They actually go out of business pretty frequently. And so what this OEM is trying to do is actually pay them faster, right? And be able to underwrite using asset-based financing, using a proprietary model to figure out, how can we get this infrastructure to our customers faster without having these delays in terms of equipment delays. So there's a lot of interesting use cases for payments, I think, and we're really seeing that as of late. And as David mentioned earlier, the bank's T+2 is just not going to work for some of these guys. So
no. I'm curious though, on the compute side, say we use David's tech, we unlock egress costs, we push those down. What can you do on the compute to kind of push that more to the edge, localize it?
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of people talk about this concept of sort of like compute markets and sort of like or like meta clouds, right? But the sort of like actually the nitty gritty technical infrastructure to actually like be able to move a computer from AWS to GCP or to your mom and pop sort of like data center doesn't really exist, right? There's a whole like sort of like CPU chipset instruction like layer that's basically missing, as well as just like the straight up like being able to live migrate a machine in roughly 30 milliseconds currently isn't like anything that's like on the market, right? And so if for as users using compute like this, right, you would experience like delays. All of a sudden your application would become non-responsive. But if we can begin to unlock that, right, what I think we're sort of like we're moving towards, right, as well as there are some people doing this like with the GPUs, right, like SF Compute, Prime Intellect, like this sort of thing, right, distributed training. I'm more focused on just like regular workloads, CPUs, right, bread and butter of the internet. But like as we go there, right, what it starts to resemble more is like actually like liquid markets, right, in which we can begin to sort of like dynamically allocate compute workloads to where they are most like efficient, where the energy is the cheapest, right, where latency is lowest, right, depending on where you want, depending on where your users are located, or just like where like you actually can get and amass the amount of compute that like you need to do the job.
That's super cool. Like, we're chasing this like existing revenue today, and we're very certain like in a year or two, I think at most, like this market's going to shift dramatically for us because like we're servicing like customers in these top tier streaming companies, but very soon like this industry is going to shift into like Gen AI, Vid AI, and essentially like everything people watch is going to be custom made. It's going to be made like 1 millisecond before you watch it. So like all the existing CDN infrastructure is nowhere near ready for that. And the compute as well. Like the compute is hundreds of miles away. So like they've got to become like tightly coupled.
It's hundreds of miles away, but it takes like, let's say like 45 seconds to like fully boot up your GPU, right? Like that's not tractable, right? Like we need to actually be able to to move at the speed, because like we're no longer moving at sort of like human speeds when we get to this point, right? We're moving at like machine speeds. But like all of our existing infrastructure is currently based around sort of like a human being's like sort of like experience of the world, right? Like what is fast to a person versus what is fast to a model versus what is fast to a market, right? Those are totally different things.
Yeah, and you both touched on the point, David, with priority fees, with kind of making compute liquid. Like, again, to me, it comes back to like, we're almost like making markets out of everything, and blockchains are uniquely good at that, and they're also good at the coordination aspect. So, I mean, to me, why I'm interested in the DePin aspect is they kind of fit like both of these buckets of like making things more liquid and also pushing things to the edge and like very hyper optimized on the coordination side.
Yeah, I think the coordination's crazy, like especially as these models come out, and we're gonna plug them together, like these agentic workflows, coordinating that like on the edge is very fascinating to me. There's so much like innovation happening there. Like we see a bunch of people experimenting with that, and they're asking us for features and like coordinating, like can we host vector data on the edges and things like that. So we're constantly getting pushed to like innovate more, and like we're like, do we need to coordinate a new set of nodes? Like there's so much like radical innovation happening in this space because we're able to provide like true value back to these traditional companies.
And I think, I mean, you guys were particularly early. I think now you've seen other people start to do something similar. I don't know if they'll get there. You have seen Walrus on the blockchain side kind of tap into the storage side. Aptos today announced Shelby. And so there seems to be like this new trend that you were very early to on like the bandwidth side that's kind of emerging.
Yeah, I mean, technically we actually started out as a storage system 2 years ago, and it was amazing because like my whole team is just engineers. Like, we have no marketing, so we're just a bunch of geeks. We sent like Multicoin, probably the worst deck ever, and they're like, okay, we need this tested. So they went and got a portfolio company to like push 10 gigabit second read and like 100 gigabit write, or it's 10 gig write, 100 gigabit read for 30 days. And that was our due diligence. So like just the product itself. So like we've got an amazing storage system already underneath. Later this week we're gonna release access to the full Solana archive. It's sitting on our storage system and powered by CDN. So I think each blockchain's got its own like high performance storage system today, and we're talking to others as well. Like, can we provide you guys bandwidth and get the data out there quicker? We're very selective. I think the Aptos Shelby system is interesting. It's got a great team behind it. Other systems, like we've looked at Filecoin, like it can take 5 minutes to get a file off of that. Like that'd have a huge negative effect on our brand. So like we've got to be very selective who we coordinate with.
You mentioned like using blockchain to really just financialize various different markets. I think we were talking really briefly before this chat about the various compute marketplaces that have launched recently. Some are blockchain focused, some are not. I'd love to get Tynan's take just on like why some of those haven't worked in terms of like actually launching some of these marketplaces, both from the supply and the demand side of the equation.
I think it's because, so there's like a number of these technical challenges, right? That like, doing sort of like CPU architecture translation, right? But then also just being able to like literally just move the computer, right? Like a running computer, right? When you move it between like, from like node to node or like data center to data center, right? You're gonna have downtime, right? But maybe like 35 milliseconds of downtime is acceptable to your user, but 3 seconds is not, right? And that is like really sort of like the core thing, because we don't design workloads, we don't design software, we don't design really anything in the world today to suddenly just like turn off and to turn off for seconds, minutes, hours, depending on the exact kind of workload you do. But then on top of that, right, you need sort of like certain time guarantees, right? If you are purchasing like an hour of compute, right, you need to know that that hour of compute will actually be executed. And the ability of sort of like to version and save the actual state of the full machine is what lets you sort of like do that. And then this leads to sort of like more sort of like complex financial instruments coming into the picture, like derivatives contracts, like futures pricing, that kind of thing. So you can actually sort of begin to like to bring some of the same guarantees that you're bringing to bandwidth to the actual underlying compute infrastructure itself.
We have a couple minutes left, but I kind of want to do a little bit of a curveball and see if the audience has any questions to make this even more engaging. You have some industry experts, from the venture side, from the engineering side. Does anybody in the audience have any questions for the panelists? I can give you the mic, or stand up, or yell it, or don't. 0 questions? Got a mic.
Oh, thank you. One of the things that I've been hearing is that you don't like to bring up blockchain to your customer, but when does it eventually come up, and how does it come up?
It's a good question.
Yeah, so we definitely don't lean into that. I think we're already like a high risk project. These people go out and they collect metrics and they're like, yeah, this works great, but when's the hotspot going to take it down? So we don't like lean in with the blockchain, but we also don't like hide it. So like we're more than happy to talk about, hey, we're building on Solana. Then there'll be some tech savvy guy in the room. He'll say, oh, didn't it have a lot of outages and stuff like that? And yeah, it was experimental a few years ago, but it's been over a year. It's like it's rock solid at this point. So there's no reason not to use it. I think for the most part, it's an async payment in the background for us. Like we focus just on the product, and blockchain is just there as like a ledger, payment system. Very, very agnostic for us.
I think I could answer that just from our portfolio company's perspective. They're called TradFi, kind of funny name. We're working on that. But it was the equipment supplier company I was talking about before. And I think they've just built such an excellent product that it it doesn't necessarily need to say blockchain on the label, right? They're also not hiding it. I think that it just makes the ease of payments much more smooth. And so, may not have to lead with that. They find out later. I think blockchain / all other cryptocurrencies just always get batched together, and it may not necessarily, rub the customer the right way at first. So that's just.
And maybe have time for one more question if anybody has another question. Then I'll turn it over to everybody here just to kind of do a 5 to 10 second pitch and like where you can learn more about each of these projects, because I really appreciate Blockworks for putting this together, because these are really some of the industry's foremost experts. They've really thought a lot about their different fields, and not only crypto, but energy, compute, bandwidth, and so definitely follow along with each of them.
Yeah, sure. So we're Crucible Capital. You can find us right here in New York City. We're a team of 3. We're making investments today. So we raised $54 million. And we're writing checks anywhere from $500K to $1.5 million. Still have at least a dozen or so investments to make over the next couple of months. So yeah, excited to reach out anytime.
You can go to vers.sh to
New website, yes.
Yeah, new website. I told you it was coming. I told you.
So excited.
To sign up for sort of like a early beta for the sort of liquid compute thing we're running within data centers right now. Soon across them. But yeah.
Well, I gotta check it out. Yeah, so you can go to pipe.network website, and there's 2 routes there. So if you want to run a node and contribute bandwidth, from your house, or if you want to hook up some big stuff at a data center, that's great too. We treat nodes differently. You can also register, create an account, and start to use it. So you can plug in your website. You can point us to a web server. A lot of our customers are storing the data on S3, especially enterprise video workflows. So we'll integrate with S3 and pull the data off there and fan it out across our global network. Today we're averaging 7 or 8 100 gigabits per second. A lot of that's about 500 gigabits between the US and APAC right now. Globally, we've got right around 4 terabits of bandwidth capacity, and if you guys need more, we can put some bounties out and scale that up really quickly.
Perfect. Well, put your hands together for these panelists. Thanks for listening.